I think we've probably all been following the recent attempts at a peace settlement. I think it's clear that the possibility of such a thing is increased slightly with the ongoing trilateral meetings. It seems now that we're waiting for the second round next weekend. And of course, a positive outcome to those talks is eagerly awaited by millions across the world. First and foremost, of course, those directly affected by the war in Ukraine and also Russia. But the war is also having an enormous impact globally. We tend in our campaigning to focus, I think rightly, on the increasing global polarization between the US on the one hand and China and Russia on the other, and all the dangers that that brings, including the risk of nuclear war. But there are other consequences too. The impact on the global economy is massive, with major implications affecting everyone. This is in large part because Russia and Ukraine are normally both major grain producers, and exports have been disrupted, as has Russia's role as a major energy exporter. Here, of course, we've seen our energy and food prices increase significantly. But of course, the prices are higher, as well as the commodities being more scarce across the world as well. The overall result is increased inflation, slower growth, disruption of supply chains, and economic uncertainty. Food insecurity is one of the most serious impacts, particularly in the global south. There is an increased risk of starvation in vulnerable areas, as well as malnutrition and social unrest going along with that. According to the UN World Food Programme, just in the war's first year, the number of people suffering from acute food insecurity in the 81 countries that they monitor jumped by 17%. That is from 276 million people to 323 million. And that figure has increased by another 10% every year. So it's an escalating problem, particularly for countries in the global south. Of course, these factors come on top of the negative economic impact of COVID-19, which we saw resulted in massive inflation at that time. The war, coming almost directly after, has doubled down on a lot of those economic problems. And increased military spending that Carol was referring to is impacting in Europe too. We have rearmament to the detriment of welfare state spending, and also increasing economic hardship and, again, social unrest alongside that. The Ukraine war is also making a big contribution to deglobalization, which is something we've seen over the past few years, with a fragmentation of the global political economy and current global economic flux. Alongside that is going political flux too, and a geopolitical realignment, with an increased Russia-China axis and divisions now clear between Europe and the US. As well as the economic and political impact, there is also a climate impact. There are massively increased greenhouse gas emissions, over 230 million tonnes of carbon dioxide in the first 3 years of the conflict. That's equivalent to the combined emissions of Austria, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. The source of those is the war itself. That's to say, the military activity taking place. But we also need to factor in the destruction of infrastructure and the subsequent need for reconstruction. And in that reconstruction process, there will be carbon emissions too. There are also terrible fires, both from military action and damage to facilities like oil refineries, and they are really pumping out carbon emissions too. There's also direct environmental damage like pollution, oil spills, threats to biodiversity, and so on. And those have long-lasting effects on Russia and Ukraine, of course, but their impact obviously spills out beyond that. So to conclude, I'll just touch on the attitudes from the global south, which is important politically. this has generally been one of active non-alignment or neutrality in the war. They have, generally speaking, refused to sign up to the US condemn and attack approach to Russia or to participate in sanctions. I guess it's pretty obvious to this audience why that is. There's a big element of distrust of Western motives, double standards based on the experience of colonialism. The Global South has a preference, as does CND and many others, for a multipolar world. So they're not buying into the US narrative. And of course, many see BRICS as a route to a more just order. So what the outcome will be is hard to judge. And as Carol pointed out, Trump's recent attack on Venezuela has shown that we are in a no-holds-barred world. The US is determined not only to maintain its global reach and keep down rising powers like China, but to extend it through military might with no restraint. So all the more reason for our movement to work for peace and strengthen our alliances nationally and internationally to make the case against war and nuclear weapons and to make sure we win that struggle. Thank you.